course I do, from Cornell. How could I forget?
We're actually going there tomorrow. I'm serious.
100%.
So weird.
Without me?
Well,
Hello?
we're actually, it's our last stop. Tomorrow after.
It's the best. It's the best. Well, you know, Forget her name brings the class down to us every year. Jennifer does.
Yeah. And she's been great at it.
Yeah. Thanks for showing up.
Absolutely. I still do.
You do? As in here, as in
Syracuse, yeah.
I didn't know that. Wait, you live here in
My wife said this year, so I'm there
Got it.
4 days a week.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Bryant, and I'm the chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture. And I would like to welcome you to the Department of Landscape Architecture and this evening's lecture, which is a tribute to Richard Hawks. It's great to see so many alumni, friends of the department, students, faculty, and others here this evening. Some people we haven't seen in a while. And I want to acknowledge the contribution that made this lecture possible. Members of the CEO Roundtable made contributions to establish what will be a lecture series. Richard was a member of the Roundtable for many years, and Tom Balseley, our speaker this evening, is also a member of this distinguished group. We will begin the lecture this evening by paying tribute to Richard Hawks. Thinking about who would be the best person to deliver these words, I could think of no one better really than Tony Miller. Tony has known Richard for decades, and they were great friends. For those of you in the room who are students and might not know Richard, what Tony's words will help you get a little glimpse into who Richard Hawks was and why we are paying tribute to him in this lecture series. Tony Miller graduated from ESF with a BS and BLA degree. He has a MA degree from Syracuse University, and he is ABD from Edinburgh University. He started teaching in 1977 at the University of Greenwich, and then came to ESF in 1983. He returned to England in 1991, where he was head of landscape architecture at Kingston University, before then again returning to ESF in 1998. He retired from SUNY ESF, Department of Landscape Architecture, in 2022. Tony and his wife, Mary Ann, have their practice here in Syracuse, A.J. Miller Landscape Architects, PLLC. He has always remained in practice while teaching, as he believes the cutting edge in any profession is found in both practice and academia. And with that, I would like to welcome Tony Miller.
Thanks so much, Margaret. So yes, I am Tony Miller, for those that have had the unfortunate chance of meeting me. I just want to start off by saying this is really important to me. Richard was a force in the field of landscape architecture. He was a very, very dear friend. And you'll find out that, strangely enough, we didn't really meet until long after we graduated. You're going to excuse me while I read this, because I'm not great at necessarily speaking directly off the cuff, so I have notes. He was professor and chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture here at ESF from 1988 to 2013, which, for those of you that don't know, is a really long time. And a not painfully long time. It's a really tough job, as Margaret, I am sure, is aware. You're sort of in between a dean and a real chair of faculty. It's not, ESF's strange. So, among Richard's accomplishments and awards, he was a fellow of both the FASLA and CELA. He was a member of the Landscape Architecture Foundation, serving on the LAF Board Emeritus Council. He created the Citizens Institute on Rural Design, which he co-directed for 23 years. The institute included the NEA-founded Your Town program, and he was the only permanent academic on the CEO's Roundtable, which, just to make clear, is a group of CEOs of LA firms from throughout the United States, where, according to one source, Richard was particularly effective at representing educators and students, as well as serving the profession and public. Richard served as Vice President of Education for the ASLA, as President of SELA, and served on many LAAB review teams, often as chair. He was also involved with the Trust for Historic Preservation. In 2019, Richard was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the New York State Upstate chapter of the ASLA. He received his MLA from Harvard, GSD, and he started as an assistant professor here in 1979. It was a very overworked department at that time, but within his second year, he was advising 2 off-campus groups, one in Scotland and one in England. Some of the people from those groups are here and can attest to the fact that Richard was busier than a one-armed paper hanger, for lack of a better way of putting it. I was his consultant for the London group. Amazingly enough, we were talking and we found out we both graduated from ESF. He graduated in 1972, and I graduated in 1973. And you'd sort of think we would have been aware of each other, but his class had 20 people. Mine had 99. I didn't even know my own classmates. In '83, I returned to ESF to teach, and we got to know each other collegially and very much as friends. By that time, the LA faculty had expanded to accommodate the larger classes that we had. Richard was a student favorite. My design and inventory analysis studio students told me that he was an engaging and inspiring teacher, and I, to my credit, decided to listen in. Excuse me. Got to do this. What I learned was far more than the content that Richard was speaking of. I watched how he engaged his students. I watched how they just said they were rapt. They were interested. I saw how a good communicator worked, and I believe I learned how to become a better teacher because of that. 4 years later, after nationwide search, Richard was appointed chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture, and we watched the department thrive under his leadership. Richard started the LA Advisory Council for noted alumni to provide input and information to faculty and students about the state of practice and trends in the professional world. You can thank this particular group as some of the major movers for the repairs and improvements here at Marshall Hall. He initiated the George Earl Lecture and expanded the department's unique off-campus program. He secured backings to fund the Kennedy Distinguished Faculty Chair and Kennedy Scholarships for Landscape Architects. Actually, I need to say something about the Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy did not graduate as a landscape architect. He graduated in forest engineering. They didn't pay enough attention to him, and Richard schmoozed this guy into providing us with these scholarships and this money. Just an amazing guy. As a result of his service to the department and college, he was designated a SUNY Distinguished Service Professor. But on my memories of Richard, he was a mentor, he was a good colleague, and he was a close friend. He made it evident to me they were a department with a duty to New York State students, not an elite design institute, which I thought we should be. We were, he said, in the unique position of being situated in the College of Environmental Science and Forestry, a place where our field can interact and thrive. We were in a place that could not try to limit our input, but rather foster a broader understanding of our evolving field of landscape architecture. What more can I add? Richard was exceptional. George Curry, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, the chair prior to Richard's appointment, remembers Richard wanting not to mess up and always showing up at George's office to get a bit of information, usually just in his stocking feet. Anyone that knew Richard, you knew when he was serious, he was walking around Marshall Hall in his stocking feet. Richard was an academic entrepreneur and a faculty and students' rights activist. Entrepreneur. People here in the class of '82, wasn't it your group that he did an advertisement to let the world know that you were all graduating? It might have been the year of '81, his first year here. He got into trouble, but he took out an advert in the local Syracuse newspaper with the students all lined up in the front of Marshall Hall saying, "We're ready to be hired." So he was an entrepreneur, but he was also a students' rights activist and a faculty activist. And he was warm, gregarious, witty, funny, and caring. He was, as our mutual friend Keith Wagner said, a truly good person, someone that after you spent talking and being with him, you wanted to be a better person yourself. So, on to the second part of my overlong introduction. When Richard was an incoming freshman studying LA, he was there because, unlike many of his classmates, he knew what landscape architecture was. Anyone out there? Did you all know exactly what you were getting into when you started? I sure as hell didn't. So he knew what landscape architecture was. And luckily for him, his older brother Bob, an SU student, had a good friend that Richard thought was cool, and that what he was studying was cool. I think it's time to thank our guest speaker for this inaugural Richard Hawks Memorial Lecture, Tom Balseley, Bob's good friend. I find it interesting that as we teach, we quite often teach multiple members of a family. I taught the son of a classmate here, an uncle and his two nephews, a daughter of an adjunct professor of our program, and a father and a son. I'm sure I'm not alone in this. But you should know that our LA department has had the unique distinction of having 3 brothers graduate from here. Tom is the middle brother. 3 Balsleys graduating. He graduated in 1966. His elder brother, Jim, graduated in 1963. And his younger brother, Doug, who I knew a little bit about because he made a stir in the junior year when I was a senior, he refused to put out his portfolio at the end of the year. He said, "You've seen it, that's it, we're done." And he graduated in '75. It's more than safe to say that the 3 brothers have made considerable contributions to the field. After his graduation, Tom practiced here in Syracuse for a while with Hubert Hares and Glavin, or Glavin, sorry, mispronunciation. And before that, and before he decamped to New York in 1969. So now on to Tom. For more than 40 years, Tom's commitment to innovative design has connected people with place, each other, and the current culture of recreation, urbanism, and sustainability. Working in the margins of the post-industrial city, his work has a pioneering and exploratory quality, pushing the limits of design within the mainstream psyche. These are transformative and provocative urban landscapes of social, cultural, and environmental significance to the resilient and livable city vision. In the arena of the city, he has faced the dilemmas of craft and art, public service, and self-expression that has shaped the profession over the past 4 decades. In the course of designing scores of urban parks and waterfronts, he has forged a design philosophy firmly grounded in the dual goals of addressing social, cultural, and environmental equity while expanding the public's landscape imagination. His diverse portfolio includes more than 100 plazas and public landscapes throughout New York City alone. It includes the Peggy Rockefeller Plaza and the Hunters Point South Waterfront Park, which for those of you ever seen Around the World in 80 Gardens with Monty Don, Tom took a starring role, bemusing Monty completely, who did not understand this was indeed a park. He's exhibited a MoMA, in a rare gesture of recognition, a park he designed on 57th Street was christened Balseley Park. His broader impact throughout the U.S. and abroad can be seen in iconic downtown spaces such as Dallas's Main Street Garden Park, Tampa's Curtis Hickson Park, Denver's Skyline Park. A friend of ours, Mike Kalo, just brought it up to me today. He saw it, Tom. He thought it was great. Usually Mike tells me all sorts of shit, but you know. He designed Seoul's Digital City Central Park, Shanghai's Harbor City Parks, Tokyo's Gate City, Moscow's Paveltskaya Palace. I don't know if it's palace or place. Is it palace or place?
Your choice.
Okay, my choice.
It's not a palace.
Okay.
It's a public
Oh,
place.
so it's Paveltskaya Place. Sao Paulo's Whale Plaza and Rotterdam's Nelson Mandela Park. Tom lectures throughout the U.S. and he teaches at Harvard's Graduate School of Design. He's one of the few people bestowed with the National ASLA Design Medal, which recognizes a career of design excellence. Besides the Spacemaker Press book that was put out about Tom, there are 2 monographs of his work which have been published. Thomas Balseley, The Urban Landscape, with a foreword by New York Times critic Herbert Muschamp, and Thomas Balseley, Uncommon Ground, with a foreword by James Corder of Field Operations. Both of these monographs are found at MoMA's bookstore. Both monographs offered a glimpse into his unconventional, idiosyncratic, and passionate design approach. Please join me in welcoming Tom Balseley.
Am I mic'd? Yeah? Okay. I told him I don't really need a mic because I'm so used to public speaking. My voice will maybe ring the walls. Anyway, that was lovely. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, SUNY. Thank you, ESF, for inviting me up here. Richard Hawks was a dear friend, and I'm happy to have, I think what you didn't mention, and one of the things I know that brought the most joy to Richard was his membership in this, some people call it a personal handshake society, but it wasn't. It was called the Round Table, started by Peter Walker. If you guys, hopefully you know who Peter Walker was. And it was, Peter selected certain people that he thought were talented and were impactful, and he decided he would bring them. Fortunately, I was one of them. I was the only one without a master's degree, but they let me in the side door. But he brought us all together twice a year to lay our arms outside the door because we competed with each other daily, and actually come in the room and be a support system. And we invited one academic person because we thought that voice in that dialogue was important, and that was Richard's. So it was a very special place for him. And we at the Round Table were devastated to hear about his loss, or our loss, all of our losses. And we decided that I should go ahead and start collecting money from the round table so that we could finance the Hawks lecture. I know, I'm a street fighter from New York, but I still cave in once in a while. Anyway, I had a couple of things written down, and now I'm not going to read them because the most basic, the key to what I want to share with you today, and I come to share, and that is, and I got a warm-up when I was picked up at the airport. Jean and I, in the course of an hour, had a lively debate about whether trees were what brought people together or people bring people together, public spaces. And no, you'll get your time. But what you're going to find today is you're not going to find many trees. You're not going to find many discussions about biodiversity or there are going to be some references to sustainability and resiliency. But my focus from the moment, actually when I was here, I knew I was going to New York and I was going to somehow find a way to have this profession have an impact in the cities. And that wasn't easy studying here because the courses weren't really skewed that way. I'll never forget that those of you who are old enough to remember M. Paul Friedberg, he was a real national landscape architect from New York, and he actually came to lecture here once. And he was the one that really convinced me that to do it as a landscape architect in the city, you really had to be a street fighter. And I know my broken voice doesn't sound like I am, but I really am if you want to go outside. And that was my focus from the very beginning, was that the cities were burning. We had civil rights, we had racial turmoil. If you talked about a public space in New York City to anyone who might have been sponsoring or paying for it, it was okay, whatever you wanted to do, just as long as there was not a bench. That was what New York City was like in the early 70s. So I can't imagine why I wanted to, dive myself into that situation, but that's how I ended up in the city. So I'm going to take you on that journey, how that journey started here and went on. Here I am. I think you've seen me by now. So here's where it starts. I challenged the conventional paradigm of what a landscape architect is. And we create a new paradigm, and that's what we dedicate ourselves to. And this is the components of it. It's people. People are attracted to people. That's what brings us together. We're voyeurs. We all love to watch people. We argued today. Oh, aren't they going to go into the plaza if you put the tree in the plaza? They want to go in and meet each other under the tree? No. They go into the plaza because they want to see other people in the plaza do their thing, vice versa. That's why they're in the plaza. The tree is ornament in that setting. In other cases, it's important. I'm going to keep looking at you. So it's a very people-centric perspective that I've brought to the profession. And the profession has changed just in the last 50 years, but even longer, because we're not just landscape architects. Although we like to say that we are a multifaceted profession, and we are. But what does that mean? Oh, some of us work in national parks, and some of us do suburban sprawl, land plans. Some of us might do golf courses. Yeah, it is a very exciting profession that way. It's got a lot of facets to it. But if you're going to take that profession into an urban setting and impact, by the way, 50 or 60% of the world's population lives in cities, if we're going to come in and make an impact on our society, we have to be willing to go into that city armed with the right mindset. And so we're not just landscape architects, where we do planning, we have to know architecture, we have to know environmental design. All of these things that you see in this, these are things that we deal with every single day. Psychology, getting our clients to yes, getting the community board to agree, getting them to yes. You can't just believe your pretty little drawing is going to get them to yes. You've got to get to their heads and find out what it is that they really want. So it's all of these elements that I find myself juggling around, constantly thinking about as I'm doing my work in public space. Sometimes it's what we call architecture. No, I'm not hiring a consultant architect. This is part of my design. I'm doing it. Well, then you have to get out of your landscape side and get into your architecture side and be willing to get into the dirty business of architecture. Did you want to be an artist? Do you feel like your profession, your artist? Well, you kind of are, but let's face it, we're in a service business. So it's not like a personal expression business. But here's the funny thing. If you do it right and you really want to be an artist, you can find opportunities in the work that you do to be artists. These are just some of the sculptures I've done in my work. It was a back door to art for me where maybe I wanted to be a sculptor. But my father said, that'd make a nice hobby. So don't give up. Find another way to do what you want to do. And furniture. You're going to find furniture is, for me anyway, it's one of those key components of what makes a public space successful or not. I love to point to, everybody loves Madison Square Park. If you know New York, we know Madison Square Park. And what is it? Well, it's benches all lined up in a row. Isn't it kind of hard to eat your lunch with someone in a bench where you got to break your back just to look at them? And then it was all that way because at the turn of the century, the gentlemen would sit in their benches with their top hats, and people would walk by promenading, and they would nod to one another. Well, okay, if that's what the bench was for, but we're in the 21st century. We got a different idea of how we want to occupy a space. So then we, as landscape architects, have to become furniture designers and have to think out of the box. I want this chair to swivel. I want to put something in front of this chair so it's my coffee table. I want. Do it. Just go out and do it. Okay. Do I still look like that? No, thanks. Let me just go. Oh my God, where's back? Yeah, okay. So I grew up in upstate New York, Endicott, New York. We were very poor. We lived off the land. We fed ourselves from off the land. I'm thankful to this day. I think my body is surviving because of that. But we really had no money. And it was tough. It was tough. And for a while I wanted to play. My father was a semi-pro baseball player and played here at Syracuse, was a superstar here. He wanted me to be a baseball player. But after playing baseball in middle school and losing a game because a right fielder dropped the ball, I was pretty much understanding that I was a sole player. And running is a great way to do that. It's an individual sport. You either lose or you win, and it's all you. So I was attracted to running, and it explains why when I graduated from school, I started my own practice. I had no partners, and up until about 7 years ago, that's the way I operated, was that as that sole player. It didn't mean I didn't know how to work in teamwork and collaborate, but when it came right down to coming back to my office, I had to be that person. So I graduate from high school. I have no idea what I want to do. This will come as a surprise. My father said, well, then you're going to phys ed school. Okay. Well, all I was interested in really was girls and sports, so it made a lot of sense. So I went to Brockport State Teachers College for a year. I got in a lot of trouble there. They suggested maybe I not come back. And I ended up in a factory, in a chemical factory, in a year off. And while I was working in that chemical factory in the summer, my brother came home for the summer from school here in this building, and he said, this is what you need to do. I said, no way. I'm not a forest ranger. And he said, no, look, this is what I do. And he started showing me his drawings. And I was always an artist. I was always very good at drawing. And he said, Tom, you got to try this. So I signed up. And I was lit like the first year. But I didn't have enough money to keep going the next year. So I had to drop out of school every single year to work for a year. You would say, oh, that's pretty tough. I'm sorry, Tom. But you know what? And I said that about myself. But the fact is, it was a blessing because my design instructor, Robert Ryman, whose name came up earlier, told the guy, Jim Glavin, the Glavin Scholarship here, who I'm proud to say I helped create, told him about me, and he hired me. And he took me on into his firm, and within a year I was designing, not just learning the craft of landscape architecture. So I'm working for this firm, and then coming back to school for a year, and then working for this firm, and when I come back to school, I'm still working part-time because they really need me in the continuation of what we're doing. So when I finally graduated, and by the way, I was on probation a lot. I just want to be honest about that, okay? I was on probation a lot. And let me see. Yeah, I wanted you to see this. These are just some drawings on the right that I did myself, a residence. It's just an example of some of my drawing stuff while I was here. But most importantly, the drawing on the left is the important one. Thank you. Thank you. All through the years, the staff here would say, you're regressing, you're not living up to your potential. I'll bet you some of you have heard that out there. We've all heard it in our lives. And I was tired of hearing it. So it was my senior year. And I put this sketch, that's the sketch, up on my pinboard in front of my drawing board. And I'm a little embarrassed to show it to you because it was supposed to say, what you call regression is my great leap forward. But doesn't mean as much as what it was supposed to say, which was, what you call regression is my crouch for a great leap forward. Well, that's what it meant. That's what it meant to me, and it was my inspiration. So my last year, I got straight A's. I won the Outstanding Senior of the Year award, and I won a National ASLA Student Design award, and an ASLA Professional Design Award for a project I had been doing for Jim Glavin's office. So I was full of myself. I thought I could just drop into New York and they were going to fall over the place and that was going to be wonderful, but it doesn't really work that way. So here it is, 1970s, city's burning, Arab oil embargo, community board meetings. You can't get anything done, and I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any support system. All I had was a portfolio of great drawings that I could take into an architect's office, and they would give me work just based on the drawings, but I didn't have the connections, and I didn't have a master's degree. So I had all these things going against me, so to speak, and it was a struggle. But then, you're going to find this interesting. Well, it didn't mean I didn't know how to have fun. So I would go out at night, and I'd realize that I'm not making any money working from my drawing board at home. I've got to find another way to make money. And rather than me pay the clubs to get into the clubs to have fun, I'm going to start my own club. So I started the Night Owl. And the Night Owl was a after hours, totally illegal, after hours discotheque that opened at midnight and closed at 6 in the morning. worked according to my hours because I could go home, take a shower, and be in my office. And I would go home at 5, get a little sleep. We needed less then. And be at the club by midnight. And I was bringing money home in paper bags. It was wonderful. And here's the other part of this. This is important. Somebody mentioned entrepreneur. I wasn't an entrepreneur. I was from upstate New York. We didn't know that stuff. I wasn't that kind of a person. But when you're suddenly thrown into this place where you have to be the owner of a club, you have to figure out how to do this. You got to work with people. You know, it's a lot. And I think, again, just like working one year and going to school one year, it sounds awful, but in fact, it's kind of a blessing. This was kind of a blessing because this opened me up as a person and allowed me to go out and deal with clients and developers and contractors and people and my own staff. And it was just like a whole new personality came out of this experience. You never know where these opportunities may lie. So keep your antenna up. So if you're starting to practice, the easy way to do it is you start doing residences. But I was interested in public space, but I had to do the residences because we had to pay the rent. By the way, the one on the, how do I go back? Okay. The one on the lower right is Martha Stewart's house that I designed out in East Hampton. So, no, it wasn't fun. I'm not going to even say that. And then we'd do work with architects. Well, that was easy. As I said, I'd show them my drawings, I'd get jobs, do work with architects. But you know what they called landscape architects? They call us sub-consultants. They're a consultant, and you're a sub. I don't like that word sub. I don't feel good about it. And so one of my goals in my career was to never have to work for architects again. And I burned a lot of bridges along the way, but since I've come back into architectural collaborations with enough currency of equity that it's a more, a better relationship than it was if you were just getting started. You have to learn your lessons. And then another thing you can do if you're starting your own practice is to enter design competitions. You can, show your design stuff, and if they're set up the right way, you might actually win something. So I've won a lot of national and international design competitions, and that contributes to your reputation. It also gives you work that you might not otherwise have had. So if you really have a fire burning in your belly, and you really want to do work, and maybe you're starting at someone's practice or in an office, you could be working in any office, but if you really feel you've got design ideas, enter a design competition. Just do it in your spare time. You don't have to do that streaming stuff that you do. Set it aside and enter a design competition if you've got that fire burning in your belly. You can't just want to do it. You have to be willing to sacrifice to do it. And I really wanted to do it that badly. Then opportunity knocks. And sometimes not so good, but it knocks, okay? I get hired to design the water wall in the atrium in Trump Tower. That's his beginning signature project. And I'm in the room, I'll share this story with you because it's been published and everything. I'm in the room, I've never met him. He hired me sight unseen based on my portfolio. I'm in this room, his big classic conference room, the one you guys got to know as you watched that stupid show. On one wall was the lighting designer's work, on another wall was the graphic designer's work, and another wall was the landscape architect's work. And that guy, I don't say his name, that guy and his wife were sitting with their backs to the wall that my work was on. And he was being himself, and the lighting people were just practically shoved out the door, and then he just ripped a new one into the graphic designers, and I'm thinking this is the end, but I was watching his wife turn around and looking at my drawing, which was, I have to say, that drawing you're seeing on the left That's 8 feet tall on sepia mylar. It was worthy of turning around for. And she nudged him, and he turned around, but then he turned around again. When they do that, I think you might have something there. So the graphic designers are done. Okay, now I've got to start, and I've got to start with this. I thought I had to start with this idea that you need to know the concept behind this. This is this vertical garden of light, of stone, of water, of plants. Shut up, shut up, shut up, stop. Stop, stop, stop. Just promise me one thing. Don't change a thing. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes. And I never spoke to him about this wall. All through the construction drawings, I never spoke to him once about it until his wife decided that it shouldn't be split-faced granite, which would have been beautiful. It should be polished marble. Anyway, it was supposed to be launching my career. But his wife would be on daytime television talking about how she designed this water wall. The architect would be doing articles in architectural magazines, how he designed this wall. And I didn't have a clue. I didn't understand what you have to do in terms of promoting yourself, either with a publicist or yourself. You have to be on high alert with that because people will take it from you. And that was a lesson I learned way back in 1980. It was I've got to keep my eye on everything I do and protect it. So, yes, I'm sharing it with you, but I think most people know I did it by now, but everybody asks that question. Yes, because actually he came back to me. We had a horrible fight over the wall. There were 5 trees. 5 trees, beautiful trees that I selected from because I was trying to be a tree person, okay? And I selected them in Florida. And they had to be put in these structural slab pits, millions of dollars to do this. And at the opening, the trees were blocking the view from one retail level to another. I had to watch them get cut down. He had his bodyguard between me and him as he said, now look, watch this. So we didn't speak to each other for 10 years, but then later on I'll show you a project where he came back to me and actually apologized. I've got witnesses on that one too. Okay, but so this is the beginning. I'm in the mid-70s, late 70s, it's 80, and there's this thing in New York called a POPs, privately owned, open, I've got it right. Help me. I've been doing them for 100 years. Privately owned public space. Thank you. And just in a nutshell, if you're a developer and you have so much volume of architecture that you can build according to zoning, if you pull that building back from the street, I'm oversimplifying this, if you pull it back from the street, you can build that same amount, but it goes up higher, doesn't it? And in New York, high views is everything. That's value up there, not down here. And if you make it a public space, a POPs, you get maybe 3, 4, or 5 more floors of building. The top of Trump Tower, the top 5 floors are all the result of that atrium, public space that was provided down at the ground. So POPs were the way the city looked at it was, we're going to give the developers an incentive to do these things because we go to Europe and we love these little spaces, but we can't buy space in Manhattan and knock a building down that's a $100 million building to build a little plaza. This is the only way we're going to get that inventory of small little spaces scattered all throughout the borough at no cost to the city and no cost to the public, all paid for by the developer. I've done actually over 100 of them in the city, I kind of was known as Mr. Pops. But they represent 95 acres of new public accessible space in the city of Manhattan. So it's been abused. It's been abused a lot. But more recently, as the rules tightened up, it got better and better and better. And these that you're seeing, these are hugely successful spaces that are all pops, and the public didn't pay a penny for them. So that was really my beginning, because I was called by all the developers. The architects got out of my way. I had a direct contract with the developers, and I could actually begin to experiment with different design languages. Instead of, if I were under the spell of the architect, they would say, oh, I want you to make the paving the same paving as my lobby, or I want you to, these materials should be the same. No, 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 go back in your little building, please, because this is going to be a space that screams public. It's not going to be looking like your building's private space. So I purposely didn't do things with the same materials, because I wanted it to stand on its own and have its own personality. And the one on the upper left is that Balseley Park that was someone referenced, Tony referenced earlier. Oh, that's right. It's coming up next. This is Balseley Park. Upper left-hand image, this was designed by a landscape architect. Very few of these were ever designed by landscape architects. I was about the only one that saw the impact that they could have in the city. I think other landscape architects there wasn't enough landscape opportunity for them, so they kind of poo-pooed these spaces. But this one particular one on the upper left was designed by a landscape architect who was kind of fooled into believing that if a couple of people came and knocked on his door and said they had a theater group and they were looking for an outdoor theater space, that he would take that as public input and he would design an amphitheater in the corner of 57th Street. By the time it was built, the theater group had shut down, and it became the amphitheater for the pigeons. So I was brought in to finally redesign it into what you see here. That's about the right and left on the top are the same angle. But it was all about, well, how are you going to keep it activated? It wasn't active before. Well, number one, I'm insisting you must put a little cafe in the corner, and then you must give it a terrace for the people to sit. So there are always eyes in the space. But more importantly, I'm going to steal all the energy from the sidewalk on 9th Avenue. Can you see my cursor? Okay. And I'm not going to be a purist park designer and say, oh my God, we can't have people walking through the park. No, I want people to walk through the park. They give a sense of security, activity, eyes, all of that. So I just stole people with this pass-through from 9th Avenue over to 57th Street by just changing the circulation. It wasn't even so much the design as it was the idea that you steal activity from the street and bring it through a part of your park enough so that people feel safe and active. So that took me into a lot of other, as I'm moving through my career, now I'm called, oh, this guy knows a lot about public space. We need him to come and fix our public space in Cleveland. Upper left is what it looked like. Some landscape architect designed that park thinking that all these hiding places and these low canopy trees would be really cool for downtown Cleveland. Well, they weren't. And so we came up with a way, a lower right-hand corner, where we saved some of the big trees, and then we created a big open green, and then put a big landform in the middle of the green. And before the park started, there were 2 more deaths with drug deals in the park. It was a complete transformation of a neighborhood, and it was starting Cleveland on its way. Actually, it was the precursor to the James Corner civic something that he did, where he showed Cleveland that, hey, you can have a very contemporary space in the city, and it will begin to resonate with the 21st century culture of living here. And it really has, and it still holds that kind of reputation. And this is just one of the, when you talk about me studying people, how they use a space or don't use a space, I'm always looking for ways How can we, as social observers like William White or psychologists, how can we improve the way, enhance the way we use the space and occupy the space beyond the bench? Just beyond the bench. So if you thought about maybe I'm going to stretch it here and say, in most cases, most of you would say your family room in the house is your most comfortable room where you're really relaxed. You know, the living room is like a little bit more uptight. And what is that object in the family room? Well, if it's a sectional or something, it's got a coffee table. And what about that coffee table? Well, there's not just coffee on it. It's our feet. Sometimes we sit on it. We talk to each other on it. It's a lot of things besides a coffee table. Why can't we have that outdoors? Why can't we do that? So, at the last minute, I introduced these concrete coffee tables to the seating in this park. And this is just an example of how it's used. Put your feet up on it. This Middle Eastern family was being treated at the Cleveland Clinic, and they were giving blessings with the coffee table. My wife is sitting on the coffee table, getting closer, showing my daughter a photo. It increases all the possibilities of how we can occupy space rather than to sit on a bench and stare in one direction. So those are the sketches that turned into this. And then it was discovered that, oh, this guy knows what he's doing, so Landscape Forms came to me and asked if I would design a furniture line for them. So I came up with this idea of the raised bar table with, instead of the chairs swiveling around their pivot, the chairs swivel next to each other or apart from each other. Ah, why? Because maybe the two of us just want to hug and kiss. Or work together on a laptop. Or maybe the three of us just want to have lunch together. More possibilities out of one piece of furniture. The one on the right, it was adopted and still is being used in the outer boroughs as a New York City subway bench, standard subway bench. Entrepreneur, I get a royalty check. Entrepreneurs, your design can turn into By the way, a royalty income is a lot better lifestyle than a service income. But here we're here in the landscape architecture school, so I shouldn't go any further. Again, failed spaces. This is Rockefeller University in New York, one of the prestigious universities in the world, and that was their central campus, upper right-hand corner. So Dan Kiley was known for, you're going to like this, Keith. Dan Kiley, as you know, was known for having designed the Rockefeller University campus. They decided that they would have me enter a competition with Dan Kiley to redo this. And I won. I won't say more. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Okay. So, opportunity knocks. I'm sharing an office space with another guy, some computer guy. Now, normally you would say, I don't speak computers. But he's a nice guy. We found common ground, and we'd chat once in a while. And one day he said, hey, a neighbor of mine in my little building over in Jersey City is an architect, and they're looking for a landscape architect for the World Trade Center in Japan. I have the possibility of getting a commission for the World Trade Center in Japan from a guy that runs a little computer thing in the corner of my office? Yes, because opportunity is everywhere. And I won that job. Upper left-hand corner is the World Trade Center in Japan. Those are supposed to be 6 huge rectangular ventilation towers that are going to be at the front door of this thing. So I convinced them to do these perforated cones. And there's a night shot because they're painted red inside, and so when the light comes on, they glow red too. And, it's just adding design to the program and then redesigning the program that way, or adapting it. Anyway, I had a great run in Japan, and one of the best parts of it was that they kept asking me to do sculpture there. And so these are some of the pieces of sculpture that I did, not the lower right. That's a museum in Seoul, Korea that I designed with OMA. But it was a whole introduction to Japan and Korea and then ultimately to China, just from that knock on the door. Okay, so this entire site was a rail yard from 73rd Street all the way to 59th Street on the west side. We're on the Hudson River, and it was all rail yard, but it was just a fallow rail yard, probably for 25 or 30 years. A lot of developers had their eyes on it. A lot of developers tried to do things here, and ultimately, the guy I mentioned before, that I couldn't mention his name, he got together with some banks and bought this piece of property, and hired two different architecture firms to do two different plans. Each one of them got thrown out and disapproved. And then the last one was brought in. He hired the people that did Battery Park City, thinking, well, for sure, they're the fair-haired boys in town. He'll get that approved. And that got thrown away too. So I was working for a not-for-profit, donating my time for not-for-profits for the Parks Council in New York City. And we, together with other not-for-profits, all got together and came up with an alternative development plan, which called for this elevated highway. This elevated highway was elevated because it didn't want to interrupt the rail activity on the ground. That's how a lot of those elevated highways happen in New York, especially in the west side. But this one's still operating as a highway, finally, ultimately connecting down to the ground now. But the plan was, we're going to take this highway, we're going to drop it on the ground, and you see the grade, the grade up to the top of the slide. All this grade up here where you see these cars here is about 30 feet higher than the grade down by the water. So we would just drop this highway in the ground, in a tunnel, cover it with dirt. It wasn't a big dig. We weren't digging anything. We were just dropping it and covering it. It was a drop and cover. And that plan, that person decided he would accept that plan because he was having some problems in other places called casinos. So he said he would accept it if we would help him get that alternative plan approved. And we got it approved with the city planning until the last 2 months of the deadline for the approval. And somebody said, but wait a minute, you haven't told us who's going to pay for moving the highway. And so I had to come up with an alternative plan until we were able to get money to move the highway. And that alternative plan has been going on for almost 25 years now. We're still waiting, but in the meantime, the west side has got this amazing park. It started in 1991, and we're still working on the last phase. See the gray hair? So that's what it looked like before, and the public process was extraordinary, and it went on and on and on. It's very rare in New York for one designer to be able to design one park of this size. The Olmsted days are over. You know, they begin to parcel them up. But in this case, the community had so much faith in us that we were able to keep going through every phase of the project. So this shows you, this scheme shows you see the elevated highway on the left. That's the scheme we had to start out with, and that's what we've been building. But then you'll see a tunnel in the middle, and then you see how we are building tunnels along the roadway, the curving roadway up here. Tunnels are being built so that there's still a hope that this highway will get threaded through those tunnels. It's just a question of disassembling it, threading it through, and then adding whatever grading changes so that West Siders can move from the west side to the river and never encounter a highway. And this gives you a sense of the character of what's going on out there, what it looked like before, and how it's touching lives in the west side daily. Now that started in 1991, and then I was called in 1993 to do this whole master plan for what we call Queens West. You'll see the label here. It says United Nations Building, so we're on the East River. The UN building is right there. And this was just an absolutely empty piece of land with some two-story kind of houses back there. New York City is crazy in that it never developed both edges of its shorelines until recently. But this was just an absolutely a post-industrial site. And the city got a hold of it. Some of it was already city-owned and asked us to do this vision plan for it. You're looking at a second version of the vision plan. Actually, the first vision plan, you see it here, it says Hunters Point South. That was actually the site of the Olympic Village when the New York City was going after the Olympics for, I forgot the year. But when they didn't, then the city decided that'll be 5,500 new affordable housing units, which are being built or have been built, and all these parks would be part of that. So that all started with the first park, which was called Gantry Plaza State Park, and these are the gantries where all the rail from the Long Island and Queens would come down here. Those rail cars would get pushed out onto a barged over to New Jersey. This same gantry would be over there. They'd get pushed back out onto land, and suddenly Queens and Long Island were connected to the rest of the world. Before these were like the iPhone of the time. There were extraordinary inventions because they pivoted on the ground and they lifted up and down as the tides came on, and you had rail barges, and it was amazing. So this was the first phase of this park. It got every national and international award. I think it was a new paradigm for urban parks where everything, this master plan, originally they asked us to do a bulkhead wall all along the pierhead line here. That would have meant it would be sort of like Battery Park City. It would have all been landfill. But fortunately, the environmentalists got involved on the Hudson and stopped that project. And so that was no longer were we ever going to be able to fill in the water. So we inherited this site that had a series of old piers and a very naturalized shoreline, and that's what we worked with. And we celebrated the history of the site by putting a couple of $1 million into restoring the gantries and really creating a park that was very different than any other park that New York had seen. That's the site, if you look at it, upper left. The UN is right across the street. And these are some of the gestures that we put into this park. We had a client that allowed me to take her on a virtual trip of Barcelona to show her the public spaces from the Olympics in Barcelona. And I said, we can do this. You can do this here. This is our moment. And she was my Medici, and she let us do whatever we wanted to do. And it really has become a standard for every waterfront park that New York has built since. You see, there are some trees in here. And it was the one that got national attention for me. All this work I had been doing was really just in New York. Everyone knew what I was doing in New York, but no one knew what I was doing nationwide. And Peter Walker came to a bookstore in New York one day and talked to the owner. He was looking through books, and the owner asked him, have you seen Tom Balseley's park? And he said, who's Tom Balseley? I'm not surprised. And the guy said, you got to go see this park. So he went to see the park, and he called me 2 weeks later and asked if he could fly in from San Francisco to spend a day with me. And I was, not having a master's degree and having kind of felt like I've been marginalized. I was a little bit in a fighting mood, but he completely dethroned me with his curiosity and his ability to set aside my failings in the academic pedigree world and just have a conversation about design and public space. And he walked out and he said, I'm going to do a book on you. That was it. So he put out this first monograph for me in his, what he had at the time was called Spacemaker Press. And then the park got, and it had an unbelievable full-page spread in the New York Times. They'd never done a spread on a park. And this one was just glowing. Herbert Muschamp, the art critic in the Times, just wrote this glowing article about it. It really pushed me to another level, and I'm forever grateful for that park. So I'm called into cities around the country to do urban parks. Dallas's first downtown park, Main Street Garden Park, the new park that changed Tampa, Curtis Hickson, West Shore Park, a new waterfront park in Portland. My career was just running and getting all kinds of work around the country. Even called in to do all the parks around Yankee Stadium, called the Yankee Stadium Uplands. They're amazing. And then China's starting to pick up, and now I'm called to China. I had done one competition, and I was up against this large firm called ACOM, originally called ACOM, and I was a finalist in this competition between them and my work, and they had a lot of power with the client and convinced the client that we should design twice as much or 3 times more than what we had done, the area that we were supposed to design, so they could really get a sense of what we can do. Well, I couldn't compete with ACOM. So I walked away from the whole project, didn't do anything, and I said I'll never work in China again until these people called me and said, we're doing this amazing thing on the harbor, and we want you to do a competition. You'll be one of 3. And I said, I'll only do it on 2 important terms. I'll only do it if I can only submit sketches. And I'm not coming to China to present it. You have to let me present it by Zoom. They agreed. And I won the competition with that sketch. There were books of digital drawings that the other competitors did, and I just gave them the sketch because all the ideas were here. And if I had a chance to walk them through this, they could clearly understand it. So don't lose your ability to sketch. Don't lose it. There's a very famous architecture, John Haydick, if any of you know him. He had this belief that the movement of this hand and this forearm, there's something in there that no one has ever found, but something is connected between this movement and this brain. I believe it. Don't forget to do it. This project also is 3/4 of a mile cap park over a stacked highway. So the highway just was made to disappear. You can get a peek of the highway here. See it below? That's to give it some natural ventilation. Then this is about 7 or 8 years ago. This is a massive piece of land in Moscow, prime location at the historic train station, and they want to build a mall here in front of the station. So it's a competition. And we enter it with a firm from LA, and we win the competition by showing them you can have the mall below grade and a park above grade with access to the mall. And people in the mall can come up into the park. People who come to the park will come down into the mall. It'll be a symbiotic relationship, and it'll be better for you, and it'll be better for the city, and getting approval. So the entire project got built. But look at the lower right-hand corner. You understand what an undertaking this was? Construction. This is our first introduction to Revit. And this was such a complicated project, but it turned out beautiful. And now we can't even have it photographed because we just are not doing anything with Russia these days, but I feel free to show you this because this was done before the Ukrainian situation. Okay, so here's again, sketches, okay. This is a plaza I was asked to design in Sao Paulo, a city where they have razor wire fences around their public spaces and armed guys with guns. And this developer building this tower said, I want to prove to Sao Paulo we can actually have a safe, open public space in a public realm, and it becomes a model for the rest of the city. So he found me, and he came to New York. We kind of fell in love with each other. That helps if you can seduce them a little bit, you know. And he hired me, and he loved everything about the design. I intended for there to be an architectural kind of style pavilion on this key corner of this plaza. And then one day he called me up, and he said, you know, I've been thinking, I'm at the low point of my career. I'm feeling like I'm Jonah going into whale. And I've got humility now, and I want to go back out into the world in a different way. So I'm thinking whale. Geez, I had this beautiful architectural pavilion. But okay, I'll go with you. So I started playing with whale. How could a whale, could it be shadow or shade for somebody? Is it something we could enter into? I kept modeling and I finally got a fabricator, and he figured out how to do this whale. And this is the IMP Tower. And when you go to the airport, if you say you want to go to that address, you're not going to that IMP Tower. You're going to Whale Plaza. So we have the ability to actually brand and make places that are known to people. Nobody's got a gripe with a whale, right? It's like I won a design competition. I didn't show it to you in that one, but it was with an egg. Who can compete with, who's going to argue with an egg? An egg is safe. And then he asked me the big plaza needed a design. And he said, you know those stories you were telling me about when you came down here to Brazil for Carnival? Remember the samba? And I said, I do remember the samba. I do remember the samba. He said, make it happen. And what you see in the lower right is my samba dance in this massive plaza that they did. It took them about 3 months to lay every single piece of terrazzo to create that. But the plaza is alive. Okay, these days, a lot of the money's in the Middle East. And we're doing a lot of that work. And that has to do with this. I've been that lone solo runner from high school, sole practitioner, but it's tough and you get tired. And when that phone call comes, maybe they get you just at the right time. And they came and invited me to dinner, SWA did. They're the largest largest landscape architect, pure landscape architecture firm in the United States. They have offices all over, as you can see, but they didn't have an office on the East Coast. And so they were pretty sure they wanted me and my firm. And they caught me at a weak point. And I said, well, I can still do the same thing. I can just do it with partners. And so now we're SWA Balseley. And we're just that studio, but we share work with each other. We share resources with each other. We do projects. We collaborate on projects. It's a lovely, yet the New York office has its own autonomy, has its own image, our own interests. We take on the projects we're interested in. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, and we're happy to be there. But a lot of that has taken us to the Middle East. So this is our final project, the Miracle on the East River, I call it. Remember Queens West, that waterfront? This last piece in front of the 5,500 affordable units, what was once going to be an Olympic site, is now called Hunters Point South. This is what the site looked like before. It had these huge landfills. Queens is a very flat borough, especially closer to the river. So these landfills were man-made landfills, and they could have just been taken down, but we decided that, we're all human beings. This is another studying people. We're all natural perchers. You ever notice people sitting on the back of a bench just to get up a little higher? We're just natural perchers. We go a little bit to higher ground. I don't know whether it's the king on the mountain thing, but it's a human instinct. And so we thought, well, it can't be just another park down there at the water level with that same perspective. If we got 30 more feet of elevation, this can be spectacular. So we decided to leverage the elevations that those landfills were providing to us. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, there's a landfill you see over on the right. I'm going to show you in a minute how we turned that into an island. But it was the topo, it was the rising tides were on our minds, even from Gantry Plaza State Park. We were thinking about how we were going to deal with that, how we were going to buffer those storms. And it was also on the Atlantic Flyway. The birds moved right up the East River. And so we were thinking about that too. And it all came down to this sketch. And if you look at this sketch, and then you look at this final plan, you see a lot of similarities. It didn't really change that much. This sketch was just working things out, and getting very close to where we thought we wanted to be. Now this was done in collaboration. It started out as a Arup, Thomas Balseley Associates project, and then I invited an architecture firm called Weissman Frady to join because I wanted a different perspective to make it a little bit more collaborative. And so all three of us worked together. The civil engineers were helping us with the stormwater management and all of that, and we were arguing for promontories and tidal marsh. Tidal marsh on the East River is impossible. We figured out a way to do that. And to create a new island for New York, we figured out a way to do that by using marsh to cut it from the land, to release it. So all this energy is coming into this place, and it's almost two parks. It's a very naturalized park that you see on the right here. And then here, it's a very, very high-intensity park. Up the block is the subway, one subway stop to Grand Central. You walk down 2 blocks and you're here, at the big green, at the big pavilion, at the dog run, at the play area, at the big deck where Bernie Sanders has his rally or had his rallies. So it's 2 parks, but they're working together as one. These are some of the resiliency and the sustainability strategies. We created a continuous bioswale along the entire back edge of the park, along the road, and pick up all the road water into that bioswale. And then, of course, you can see we created this marsh, and the marsh it's a tidal habitat marsh. It's got the habitat for that flyway, but it's also taking in the tides. And when those storms come, the marsh is buffering the land of the park, but also the development and the community behind it. This park, for me, when I showed you that complex diagram of everything a landscape architect is, it's all in this park. It's the one I point to. That is kind of the culmination, not the end of my career. Nobody tried to do that, but the culmination of all of my philosophies about public parks, public spaces, and public waterfronts. So this is it built before any of the buildings were built. Now all of the buildings except one are built in those parcels that you see. They're tall towers, but they're at home in this park. And you can see all of these elements. This is the green, that big central green that's it's the core of the park. From rallies to high school, there's a high school across the street that's built. This is their play yard. They come out here. Or just on the weekend, we put a little elevation to this lawn you see on the right, and then we created a level area of artificial turf that's edged by these stairs. So all kinds of things happen in that turf. You just imagine it's packed with people. But if you want to get out of the action, you can get up on the mound and watch the action on the turf, or watch the skyline or the river. Urban dog runs. I won't do an urban park without an urban dog run, because dog owners, empty nesters that move back to the city, young couples before they have children, that's what makes our city live. We have to recognize them. We have to stop building play areas for children. It's too family-centric. We have to recognize that dog owners are part of that urban revitalization. So we just insist on it. And this will give you an idea how we managed to pull off this marsh. This is a very strong current river, so we knew we had to create a revetment along that edge to protect the marsh. But we went further than that, because then we started challenging the engineering of the revetment, saying, I don't really understand, why can't the inside slope of the revetment be planted? I don't understand, why can't the revetment be wider where we can actually have a trail on the revetment? Why can't we do that? And there was no real reason why we couldn't do it. So let's do it. And so this isn't just a marsh. This isn't just a resiliency thing. This is taking care of the social and the cultural needs of this community. This is an extension of their enjoyment of this park. Some people would rather walk this trail than be anywhere else in the park. It's just adding to the possibilities that where people will fall in love with this. And when you're on this trail, you're trapped in this very unique dialogue between nature and that marsh and that river and that skyline. It's magical. This is the making of the island. That's what the island looked like before. Then we started scraping a marsh behind it, and we ended up with this extraordinary island moment where you can get away from the park, away from everything, have that crescent of trees giving you the privacy you want, and just have you in that skyline. Those spheres that you see in the grass, each one of them is painted differently with the luminescent paint, and they represent the 7 stages of the moon, which is the artist's connection with tides. So instead of a public art piece getting dropped here, we kept talking to her about how important the tides were as a story of this place, and that's the way she tells it. This is the promontory. What was that ugly landfill has now turned into this extraordinary place to watch the sunsets, to get away from everything. Everybody loves to lie on a sloping lawn, right? But do you know how much they love to have their own personal space? It's what I call the family raft, tucked into the lawn. It's not about trees, it's about people. That's the first place they go. And then the drama. The greatest wedding photo in New York. 30 feet above the marsh, cantilevered over it. I sketched this together with the architect, and they did an unbelievable job of making this happen. But it all started as that landform. And fortunately, a lot of people like this park. And it got noticed by MoMA, so we were exhibited at MoMA for a year as new impactful public spaces. And it led to a phone call from the deputy mayor of Rotterdam, who asked me to come to Rotterdam. Could I do the same thing in Rotterdam? Now, there is this Dutch invasion that our profession is experiencing. If it's not Dutch, it's not really great design. So we're starting a reverse exchange program. So we were brought over. We won the competition, and they decided to name this park Nelson Mandela Park. But you're going to see. Look at this. This was the largest harbor in Rotterdam, and this is the park. Well, look what they did. Oh my God! You can't do that. You can't put land in water. Oh yes, you can. If you're surrounded by a community that desperately needs parks, and you have a harbor that is not being used for harbor purposes anymore, and it has no environmental below grade value per se, the city weighed these things and they said, no, we've got to put a park in this harbor so that it's available to anybody within 5-minute walk for these communities. And that's how it became Nelson Mandela Park. And they're now filling it in the water. It's taken a long time. And since we did that, and the next harbor over, I'm going to point here, they decided to have another competition for that one, and Michael van Valkenburg won that one, and he's got his park half built already. So I'm losing the race, but we're just happy to be there. This is the important slide for me. See, I don't leave out nature, okay? But we have to connect with each other. And that's what we're in the business of, at least I hope we are, is connecting us to each other and our natural environment. We can do that. Thank you for your patience and attention. Well, who will be the first? Okay. Oh, no? Okay. Next.
Some people in this room. If you don't know, it's choose your location for all kinds of
Oh.
or a semester abroad.
Oh.
Just like doing everything that you said, if you have any advice about how to choose that location or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you know, here's the thing. When I was you, I was absolutely lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So when you're choosing a location, you want to sync it up with like what you're really interested in. So if some of you have a sense of what you're interested in, that would be obvious advice. Choose a location that's going to kind of feed that curiosity and that fire. And if you don't,